we ride on the rails of existing providers. The same providers that provided that workload in the first place, to whom we built the integration, are the same providers who will walk us in the door and work with us to drive those deals. So that's really the story that partnership leaders need to take to their CROs and their customer success teams, is that we have the best way to either create net new revenues in a recession or increase net retained revenue in the case of an existing customer.
Allan, great to have you today.
Roman, awesome to be with you. So good to be talking about partners and how we can make things happen in these turbulent times we're in.
You are like a father of GoToEcosystem. You are HBS graduate, managing partner of Digital Bridge Partners, and you've been consulting businesses on over many years about how to do partnerships and how to do ecosystem more recently. Last couple of years, you've been very active in this ecosystem movement. I'm really excited to talk with you about all of this. Anything you would like to add in a way of introduction?
No, just that I'm all about helping partnership teams really succeed, and it's my joy, my pleasure, my passion to see us make businesses work a lot better by adopting partnership best practices. So
we are sort of entering into a very interesting and challenging, you might say, year, right? Where ecosystem was banner and the buzzword of the last year. I would love to kick us off to kind of by asking, like, what's your latest definition of ecosystem? How do you think about ecosystem? And maybe to add to that, if you think about this discussion and who is this will be most helpful for?
When we think about ecosystems, it's a big word, and oftentimes it's confusing, and it's sometimes ephemeral, and therefore, CROs say, I don't have time for that nonsense. Let's just be practical. In the most practical sense, I think that the first foundation of ecosystems is to think about it in the relationship to the customers and prospects that we're selling to, and it's basically everybody that surrounds the people we care about. We care about customers and prospects. The ecosystems are all the providers, the consultants, the value-added resellers, system integrators, and technology partners who surround the customer or prospect that we're interested, through whom and with whom we can add more value. So if we just start out by just saying it's that which surrounds the customer and the prospect, we're in a good place. And the next stage on that is which of those people become our partners? And that's our partner ecosystem. So really we can think of ecosystems in terms of the ecosystem of the market, and then the ecosystems that is comprised of our partners. So those two macro and micro views of ecosystems pretty much cover most of the bases.
Talking about who is this for, is it mostly focusing on tech companies, different type of partners, like integrations maybe, or is it sort of overarching theme about every type of organization that will be in your ecosystem?
Every industry is going to have ecosystems. Every ecosystem has ecosystems. We happen to focus at Digital Bridge on the B2B SaaS industry, one of many industries. But what's kind of cool about the ecosystem around B2B SaaS and SaaS technology, for that matter, is it's the harbinger. It's the leading indicator of where things are going. So increasingly, as B2B SaaS ecosystems mature, we're going to see that same maturation start to take place inside of other industries. And so we're right at the vanguard, if you will, of this. Of what my buddy Jay talks about is that the decade of the ecosystem. We're right at the vanguard of that, and everything that we see happening and that we as partnership leaders drive in this next couple of years is going to change business in every industry. So really at a really pivotal time, these next couple of years in tech will really define to a great extent how businesses will perform and evolve over the next 20, 30, 40 years across every industry. So it's pretty heady times, right? We're right at the cusp of it.
I agree with you that SaaS is a leading ecosystem thinking. At the same time, I think what is ironic about that is that SaaS is the first who went into sort of recession, right? Or one of the first. So I think ecosystem is great, and I think a lot of excitement about the subject and idea and the concept that everyone is kind of feeding each other. But thinking about 2023, which is not going to be easy. You wrote a really good blog post about what are the things that are important for companies sort of prioritize in this time. Could you maybe summarize it in any brief version?
There's bad news and there's good news. The bad news is that spending's really impacted and customers are really confused, and there's a whole lot of sort of pressure on revenue teams to sort of figure out how they're going to make it work. That's the bad news. The good news is they're still going to be spending. It's not like spendings go away. It's just that what was easy spending is going to become harder spending. So the real key for partnership leaders, and this is really a time of great opportunity, is to focus on that part of the ecosystem which has the highest probability of being associated with the spend that will take place. So what do I mean by that? There's really, three kinds of things that are going to get prioritized. Number one is workloads that existing customers, I'm talking about the end customer, have, because they need to make sure those things really work, because they've already put the money into those workloads and they're looking for ways to extend the workloads without having to buy a bunch of net new stuff that's hard to do and complex. So number one is existing workloads are going to get prioritized. Number two is any new thing that's connected to those workloads that has fast time to value is going to get prioritized. And three is any place where I can use an existing provider. So think about those three things: existing workloads, fast time to value, and existing providers. Well, what do partner ecosystems, especially tech partner ecosystems, bring to the CRO and the customer success teams is connections to customers' existing workloads, whether it be a prospect's workloads or an existing customer's workload, doesn't matter. Two is, because we built these integrations, we have these fast time to value solutions, which are relatively easy to add to what they already have. I call it you already have half a pizza. Now we bring the other half of the pizza, still the same pizza. You don't have to get a new pizza. And then the third thing is that we ride on the rails of existing providers. So the same providers that provided that workload in the first place, to whom we built the integration, are the same providers who will walk us in the door and work with us to drive those deals. So that's really the story that partnership leaders need to take to their CROs and their customer success teams, is that we have the best way to either create net new revenues in a recession or increase net retained revenue in the case of an existing customer. And the only real pivot is whether it's your prospect, which means it's your new revenue, or whether it's your existing customer, which means it's growing NRR. It's very simple. So really, if we just follow that mantra and continue to push that pedal to the metal, we will see at the end of 2023 that the most productive growth engines for ARR and NRR growth are partner ecosystems. But it's going to require, this is the courage, conviction, and confidence part, that partner leaders don't put their head in the sand and try to survive this time. You have to go for thriving, not surviving. There's not a time to go for surviving, because you're going to be one of the many people that are going to try to survive. And inevitably, that means part of your team is going to get cut, because there are going to be a lot of cuts taking place, right? You already see a bunch of them now: Amazon, Meta, Salesforce. They're going to be more to come. So you don't want to be on the cut side of that. You want to be on the save side. And the way to do it is to go for the performance rather than the persistence. Like, you want to perform, not just persist. You want to thrive, not just survive. And that's a real message we're trying to give to 2023 scaredy folks out there, is that it is scary, but that's more of a reason to double down rather than a reason to hide, because a lot of people are hiding.
There's a great framework, and I love 10x thinking as well. When you think about sort of ecosystem, I saw your framework, which is you started thinking from like tech integration, and then this tech integration drive leads right to partners, and then partners sort of reciprocate and drive leads to you. So we are talking here about the same framework, right? When for 2023, or do you think this framework should be modified?
No, it's even more important. Let me just speak a little bit about it, because I think it's going to be an important part of a managed service offering that we're going to be bringing out. But the basic gist of it is that if we want our partners to give us leads, we have to give them leads first. Now, in a recession, the last thing you'd think you'd want to get your CRO to do is to is to resource the providing of leads to somebody else. It's like, that would be kind of crazy. It's like, we're in a recession. What are you doing, Roman? You want me to give you money so that you can give leads to someone else? No, I want to give you money so that you can give business to me, right? This is the logic of a scarcity mindset, which, by the way, we live in a scarce world. The business world is a very scarce mindset. Just generally speaking, a lot of greed, fear, and scarcity. It's even worse in a recession. It's like you get even people more freaked out about like mine, holding tight, protect the runway. You hear all these terms. The best way to get a partner to give you business is for you to give them business. So the starting point of this, right, is that if you have integrations and you have a customer success team, many people on listening to this have both of those things. Your customers want you to tell them which solutions are going to lead to the highest return on investment at the lowest possible cost with the highest time to value. The customers want you to tell them that. That's a lead for your partner. And if you do that, and you do that continuously, we have data, unequivocal data, that any CRO would have an impossible time refuting, that will result in leads back from your partner to you. Anybody in partnerships knows this, give to get, right? We actually call it give to give, but let's just stick with utilitarian approaches to altruism. If I give you something, there's a natural tendency for you to want to give it back to me. So that's strategy. That's actually a strategy. Give leads to partners to get leads back. Now, the beautiful thing about that strategy is it's not just altruistic, because as I said earlier, when your customer success team tells that story, they're actually helping the customer. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to make this really practical and actionable in a short-term sense. But it's a strategy that every single tech partner leader should be embarking on today, which is how to drive referrals to partners as a way of creating what we call the reciprocity loop to get leads to come back to you. And then we think that anybody who's not following that strategy is missing out on a ginormous opportunity this year.
I agree with you, and it sounds like very right and noble even. But at the same time, we are sort of living, like you said, a time when every CEO is concerned, to say the least, about the future. And they probably, when the head of partnership would approach them and say, hey, we need to build all these integrations because we have the signal from the market, CEO would probably ask like, okay, this sounds good, but like, what is your business case? And when do you expect to see return on this investment? And the answer probably would be end of the year, maybe next year. I mean, the integration building cycle is not quick. Even if you use middleware, right, it might be sped up, but at the same time, it's still, you need to build this entire loop. What about all this kind of channel, resell, and other type of partnerships that might kind of help you to get to this result a little bit faster? Like, what do you think in terms of, maybe like hedging bets?
Let's start first with some data, right? The vast majority of all Series A, B, C, D, E, F companies have some form of integration already in state. And as you move closer to F, the chances are those integrations are built, proven, validated. So I agree with you in 2023, this is not the time to be asking for a bunch of money to build net new integrations with unproven partners. That is complete failure, because right now what we want to do is monetize. We don't want to have long tail investments that take multiple quarters to monetize. So the answer to the first part of your question is start with what you have, right? Don't start by asking for money to develop partnerships. Start with what you have. Secondly, there is only one data point that matters in a recession, and that's net retained revenue. That's it. There's no other data point that's more important than net retained revenue. Why? Because if you're looking for more money and or you're looking to extend your runway, there is no faster, quicker way to do it than to retain your customers and grow them. That's it, right? Because net new revenues are harder to get. Demand generation is cut back, but what you always have is existing customers using your tools. And here's something that's going to happen in the next 12 months. How do you think customers are going to reclaim budget? They're going to terminate SaaS contracts. They're going to drive churn up because any product that's not performing, forget about net new, they'll just knock them out. So in the context of the next 12 months, your customers are going to start churning you out unless you do something. And the best thing you can do, by far, out of the gate, 100% ROI return on investment is drive integrations. If you have existing customers who own both you and your partner solutions, there's no purchase. All you have to do is to drive that integration. And when you do that, churn goes down and cross-sell and upsell goes up. So out of the gate, start with what you have, drive integrations into existing customers. You know, the cross-beam overlap that says we both have a customer. That's the first place to start. And that story to your customer success team is there is 100% correlation, even I would argue causation, between increased integrations and increased retention. So if you drive those integrations, you're going to see returns. Now, along the way, what's going to happen is you're going to then get to the next quadrant of your prospect in your partner's account or your partner's prospect in your account. And when you find those connections, that turns on that reciprocity machine that I told you about. That's the next step. But now I'll answer your question, which I think is legit. You can't just focus on tech partners, right? You also have to focus on services partners. And again, I think the strategy is very similar. Anytime you see a customer, right, with any level of churn risk, this is the time to engage your channel, because your channel is probably your best bet at addressing any kind of churn issues. And what you should be focusing on is focusing on an understanding of what is the nature of churn, why is it happening, and what you can do to drive adoption and re-engagement, if you will, and then how your channel can play a role in facilitating that, either with a freemium or a low-cost managed service. But at the end of the day, if you can get your channel and your partners, your agency partners, your channel partners, your managed service partners to see opportunities to drive, even if it's small ticket items to hold a customer, that's going to show up in more sales for them, more sales for you, happier customers. And then, of course, once we put a fork in churn, then people are going to go, hey, I want to invest more in the partner team because they're the ones who are keeping our churn from going down. Make sure you track this stuff too, right? Make sure you put a line in the sand saying current churn rate, and then show the activities you're doing on a set of partners. And what you'll show, of course, when you engage either of those channel sides to lower churn, you'll see net retained revenue higher on the channel, hire on the tech partners, and then that's going to result in more investment in your company. But at the end of the day, it's like that's the magic.
I have no doubt, and I completely agree with you that more integration producing much higher stickiness. It seems to be the case on all kind of big companies, like from Atlassian to everywhere else. And then I think sort of multi-product seems to be producing similar effect, right? Like Salesforce is talking a lot about multi-cloud, they call it, which is multi-product effectively, and then sort of four-product retention rate, sort of 80%. Or I mean, the growth is much higher. At the same time, I've been in a situation when I was actually leading partnership program in a pretty sizable company, and the program was undoubtedly increasing retention on a multi-million customer base. But it's really difficult to actually sort of prove it and then get your management excited about this partnership. They feel that this is almost like a secret cow. You cannot really kill it because it seems to be working, but it's not like producing net new results. So they always tempted to kill it anyway. So I'm curious, what do you think about sort of partnership? Like again, sort of thinking about next year, leading new business, I would say. A lot of people hire partnership managers with the idea of expansion and growth and stuff like that, not necessarily retention.
Well, you remember I talked about this relationship between ARR and NRR. So like if I'm trying to drive retention, I am going to be driving ARR for someone, and the someone's going to be a partner because they're the prospect in my account. So flip the script again, and let's take you're a partnership leader, and you have an integration, say with Stripe, or integration with NetSuite, or with Sage, or with any large player, Salesforce, whatever. If you've done your homework on what we call the total available revenue, which is to say, in my prospects sitting inside of Salesforce customers, there's an 8-figure, 7-figure total available revenue in that pile, in that group of customers, the Salesforce customers who are my prospects. You have now got a business case to go back to your marketing department and say the following: where are you spending your demand gen? Marketing department. And they'll say, oh, well, we have a persona, we have our ICP, we have our segments, and we're going after this persona, and we're driving top of funnel, blah, blah, blah. The business case on the return on investment to spend against the overlaps is between 8 and 10x better than the spend on a generic demand generation program. And why that is the case is because when those overlaps are mapped, you're basically walking in with a referral. So let me give you a for instance. Let's say I want to go after Roman's accounts, and I have prospects in your accounts. I have a better together story, a better together solution. And we've been doing this now with a number of clients with an agency called Amp Factor that we work closely with, who pioneered with us on this BTS, better together story idea. And basically running demand generation into that overlap between my prospects and your accounts, the return on investment of that spend is 8 to 10 times better than the return on investment of you going after your accounts blind. So with respect to the recession, yes, of course, it's going to be harder to get dollars. But when I produce a proper business case with total available revenue, with average deal sizes that are 30% bigger, with conversion rates that are 70% better, using ABM, account-based marketing techniques in the larger accounts, which produce 2 to 3 times the lift, that's how you get to that 8 to 10x better return on investment. And what CRO, CMO, CEO, or CFO is going to say in a recession? No, I want to keep doing it the stupid way. When you've presented them with a solid business case. By the way, the other thing that's cool about this, you can pilot it, you can test it, you can drive attribution. All of these nonsense about like, oh, it's influence revenue, we can't really see it. No, this is pure sourced revenue, 8 to 10x better. This is the kind of stories that partner leaders need to take their CROs and their CMOs. And in order to get there, we are going to have to pilot it, but that's okay. We have 12 months to avoid getting fired. Let's get the first quarter into thrive mode rather than survive mode, like I said at the beginning, right? And these are some of the techniques that you can use to have those conversations and get the ball rolling.
Just so I understand everything right, you are talking about still tech partners who have a set of customers, or you're talking about a variety of partners?
This can also work with a large system integrator. The challenge in doing it is it's a little bit harder to scale the mechanisms with a partner. With the nice part about doing it within the tech partnerships is that the account mapping is a little easier to do, and the mechanisms of driving demand generation are a little bit more predictable and repeatable. So it's a little harder to explain it to your CRO, your CMO, when it's a lot different with Accenture than it is with Deloitte, and it's different with Capgemini. Not to say you can't do that, or CDW and whatnot in the corporate reseller space, but it's more repeatable and predictable across the tech partner landscape, and that's why it's a little bit easier. If you've got the integrations, you got to have the integrations, right? If you don't, you got other problems.
So this 3 type of revenue, right? It's like a sort of partner sourced, partner influenced, and partner attached. Sort of 3 buzzwords that I use. Like, what are the things that you think worthwhile focusing on, and like how do you see this revenue attribution model seems to be evolving? And like for many partnership leaders, it is difficult to get revenue attributed to partnerships, right? And I've been in those shoes myself. What would be sort of your advice for those who cannot like really connect with like Crossbeam or whatever account mapping solution because the organization don't allow them to do that, or so like what are the ways to prove your value like in the absence of a clean kind of revenue attributed to you?
There's several ways to do it. On the NRR side, it's a little easier because the proof points is based on a function of integrations, lowering churn, and then triggering upsell and cross-sell. So you have attribution is very strong there because it's like before churn, after churn. Before churn, no cross-sell, upsell, churn. After we prevent the churn with the integrations. Now we see the customer retention retaining high, and then we see the cross-sell and upsell. So that one's a little easier to prove. So even though it is influence at that level, it's directly attributable. On the ARR side, where you get into trouble because it's hard to figure out like who actually produced that lead. There's like a couple of ways to solve that problem. One is to go the agency route. So one of the reasons we have our partnership with AmFactor and our GoToEco revenue engine is because there, since the agency is driving the demand generation, we actually have direct attribution because we're not in a system that's getting confused and conflated between direct and channel. It's all better together solutions drive together with an ABM campaign that can actually be attributed from top of funnel to middle funnel to bottom of funnel down to close one, and it's 100% attributed. So that's one way to do it. The second way to do it is to look at some tools, like we're pioneering some tools with a company called Everflow, which you may have heard of. And Everflow it has a methodology where we can actually find a way to get past what I call last touch attribution. Last touch attribution is when you did a bunch of work in the partner team, the customer clicked on the Google ad, and then somebody said, oh, well, that had nothing to do with you. That was the Google ad. So having a methodology that can actually see the breadcrumbs that lead to the Google ad allows to say, even though the last touch was the Google ad, the 6 touches before it were all partner driven. That's sourced revenue. So that's a second way to do it. And the third way to do it, I think, is to basically start putting pilots and use cases together where you can do comparatives. And you could say, over in this space where we did the Better Together story, with or without ABM, with or without agency, we're able to see this level of deal size, this level of conversion rate, this level of close time. Let's compare it to these. So when you start seeing 80% higher close rates, 33% higher deal sizes, 50% faster closes on this pool versus this portfolio that you didn't, you begin to show that, correlation becomes causation. So it's difficult to do it in a causal way because cause in B2B is complicated. Like we're talking about, the average customer has 707 partners. There's 28 cycles, steps in the sales cycle. Can you actually prove definitively that you created 100% of that deal? That's pretty hard to do. But when the correlations are at the level I'm talking about, any CRO can take that to the CFO and say, we're investing more here. This works. This doesn't. And then gradually what's going to happen over the next 3 years is we're going to see 50+% of B2B SaaS being directly attributed to the ecosystem. Today, that number is in the 5 to 10%, depending upon series. Like, of course, we have Microsoft who say, 95% of my business is partner, 96% is partner attached, but Microsoft's been around forever. Many of these early stage companies, they overinvest on the B2B side for direct. The partner is always this tail. The tail will whack the dog until the tail becomes the dog.
That would be amazing. Of course, if like half of the revenue will be directly sourced and kind of attributable to the partnerships.
I said directly attributed. It won't all be sourced. That's a high order, but directly attributed, meaning that the predominant driver of the revenue will be partner.
So it will be one of the touch points, basically, right? Among others, but it will be the most influential touch point.
Let's say this: if there's 28 stages in the sales cycle, the biggest and most important ones will be from the ecosystem. There's still going to be touch points. You're still going to have sales reps, BDRs, customer success people. All these are important roles. It's just that they will be supporting the predominant partner motion rather than looking over their shoulder and saying, well, bring me some source revenue and I'll be happy. That's not going to happen.
How do you persuade partners to take a leap with you, especially in the beginning when you don't have you might have amazing better together story, but it might not have proof points that would be compelling enough, or partners would be reluctant to kind of share their attention, which is scarce today. So how do you persuade them to work with you?
The most important thing to do is to make and deliver promises. Those promises don't have to be grand, build the Taj Mahal in one day promises. They just have to be promises that you make and deliver. And then you need to figure out like degrees of freedom, like the old adage, that the most successful people are not the ones who promise the world. They're the ones who understand that their degrees of freedom are this, and they promise this much and they deliver this much. So the key thing at the beginning is value creation through making and delivering against promises. So you can always find a promise you can deliver on. And then you can always build on that promise to build another promise and another promise. And eventually what ends up happening is you get other people at your organization to see that the promises that you made resulted in value, and then they want to make promises. And gradually we're making lots of promises across our organization, and we see scale. So it's actually a very simple model. A lot of people talk about like, I'm on my own. Okay, well, be on your own. Make a promise, deliver against it, and show me that partner now trusts you more today than they did yesterday, and next week more than they did last week, and so on and so forth. And then turn that make a promise, deliver a promise into a roadmap that gets you where you're going to go. And I don't care what stage you're at, there's always a way. Like people will say, oh, I'm working with Salesforce. I can't get them to talk to me. Well, what if a Salesforce agency talks to you who lives in the same... What if you go to lunch with a Salesforce agency who's working for Salesforce, and they will recommend you into a Salesforce account? If you did that times 100, what's the probability that the Salesforce AE or customer success team would not find out about that? So there are always, even with the giantest partners, there's always pockets of value creation. It's like if you wake up every morning and you say to yourself the following: how will I add value today for my partner ecosystem and my partner's ecosystem? It's getting a little bit complex in there. Like Salesforce has a partner ecosystem. If you add value to their partner ecosystem, you add value to them. So as long as you're in the continuous mode of value creation for the ecosystem, you cannot fail. By the way, that ecosystem is composed of both people, companies, and individuals. So the other thing that's really key is that although we're in B2B, we think about my company, Digital Bridge, is working with your company. It's still Allan and Roman. And so if you can bring it back to human factors and say, there is a person in the partner ecosystem that I can find and add value for them. And when I do that, they will want to reciprocate. And that reciprocity is the foundation of value creation for me, for them, for their company, and for my company. And as long as you stay close to that, be generous, give, continuously look for ways to add value. And don't worry too much about the lagging indicator, even though that's what your boss is telling you. Remember that the leading indicator is the only thing that produces the lagging indicator. And the leading indicator is value creation and generosity. And the lagging indicator is reciprocity. But that back-end loop doesn't ever happen at scale if the front end isn't good. It's like it's like soup. You got to get good ingredients. Otherwise, the soup will never taste good.
I agree with you that you need to cheerlead your partner, and if you cannot go to your partner, and then you can go to the partner, your partners, and then build a relationship seems to be very crucial. One thing that I would probably add to this is that it's actually a good idea to not be afraid to ask as well. Set expectation and deliver is great, but also asking like small things is also like very important way to build relationships, and people forget about that. Actually, sort of when you ask someone for something, the other side will be more inclined to have kind of another conversation with you rather than sort of less inclined.
It's actually a good point. I call that the don't pretend that you have your act together and you don't need anybody's help mantra, which is I need your help, Roman. I actually need your help to host these sessions. So Roman, will you host a live partner insight session with me? I would like your help And yes, sure, let's do it. And so it's like asking for the help you need is a gift. It actually seems like you're needing something, but you're actually giving an opportunity to get. You're giving a gift to the partner to let them give to you. Sounds a little crazy, but it's how it works.
I agree with you. Let's not go like too meta. Let me rather ask you like a question. People start partnership with the idea it's going to be great, and I'm sure it will be if you put enough, time and resources. But like, how do you manage expectations, especially today?
Some things that partner teams tend to skip is they skip the first two steps in asking for money. The first step is, what is the business case? And the second step is, what is the pilot? Because at the end of the day, if I ask for money and I don't have a business case and the pilot figured out, then what inevitably is going to happen is I'm going to get a no, and they're going to say, go prove it to me. And what that means is that you didn't do a good job of setting up the business case. If you think like an entrepreneur and say, in all the analyses that I've given you today about like whether you're going after ARR or NRR, there's a business case there. There's a certain amount of total available revenue. There's a certain approach you can take. There's a pilot you can prove to show that it works. And I think that setting expectations really is about creating a roadmap of success and then indicating what you're planning to do across that roadmap. And then like back to the whole story of, make a promise, deliver a promise. You make a promise, you make sure you can deliver on that promise. So setting expectations is a function of like having the right business case with attenuated risk factors. Like if there's a big upside in that business case, don't say you're going to hit that upside. Say that is an upside. That's a stretch goal. Here's a guarantee, and here's our best case. So go for the best case, or go for the moderate case. Prove a pilot to show that you can get the first results in, and then scale that pilot. And then there's a whole bunch of different techniques. But I think if you follow that approach and you build a proper business case, which almost no partner teams do, I've not seen very many good business cases for investment. And that's why you're going to, by the way, if you got no 6 months ago, you're going to get a lot more no's now. I have many of my clients talking about like how they have relatively straightforward business cases and they're getting no's. And I look at the business case and I go, well, that's why you didn't get the money. There's no total available revenue.
Everything should be very airtight these days. One of the viewers sort of asked like that our dev team has a major backlog of work and integrations to get through. How do you prioritize in this environment?
I think the most important thing to do in this marketplace is to figure out which of the potential integrations that you think are going to be potential short time to revenue or short time to market are associated with the highest need. And the best way to do that is to talk to your sales reps. Your sales reps know which integrations are really critical. They're the ones that the customer says, if you want me to buy this thing, it's got to be integrated with such and such. And I think you want to make a case that if you're hearing 3 or 4 sales reps say that, there's probably 20 or 30 prospects that are like that. So what you can do is you can use I will be able to close these deals with this integration as your justification for getting the integration built. And then once that integration is built and you close those deals, then you can start turning on the ARR, NRR tap that I talked about. But you got to have that integration in place first. And so I think that is probably the best and fastest way to drive an integration if you don't have one, is based on sales rep comments.
But would you do it even like these days? Because I think previously we had a discussion that you would maybe stay away from building like a lot of new stuff.
Stay away from a lot of new stuff, but if there's 1 or 2 that really matter, you'd be foolish not to invest in those, because those are probably ones that are big deals. So if you have if the return on investment comes from a few big deals, and you can show that you recovered the cost, in all likelihood, the answer is probably going to be outsourcing that integration. Because if your dev team is booked, then you're going to probably get an SI to come in and do that integration for you. So the question is, what is the MVP on that integration? What's the return on investment across how many deals do you have to close? And prioritize those, because that's not something that's going to take forever, but it's something that's going to ring the bell immediately.
What does the viewers ask? Like, how do you grow the ecosystem rapidly? And I think it's I want to add to this question your initial suggestion to think sort of 10x, which I think is great. We almost like went the entire loop. So going back to this question, if you would have like a CEO asking you like, how do you grow my ecosystem rapidly in this environment? So what would be your answer?
I would reframe the question as like, how do I most quickly monetize what I have to then have a self-justifying fund to do more? I think growing the ecosystem rapidly right now without monetization being front and center is not a smart strategy. It's exactly the reason I said it earlier. Don't be spending a lot of time on things that are far away from revenue. But if you follow the mantra of value add for the partners and fastest time to revenue for your company, and you just keep focusing on that, we have the two quadrants. One quadrant is how long to market, and the other one is how big in market. So if the time to market is low and the amount in market is high, that a total available revenue is high, time to market is low, those are your Paretos. So if you continuously just graph like here are all the integrations I have and all the partnerships I have, these are the ones that are not quite ready and have moderate revenue. These are the ones that are almost ready and have high revenue. Focus there. And if you continuously just iterate on that upper right-hand quadrant, it's really going to be a much more efficient way to think about growth than to think about just generically growing the ecosystem, because I don't think you're going to see much of that happening this year.
It's really good answer. Thank you so much for reframing it in a compelling way. So look, I guess my very last question is sort of looking forward to 2023 after a couple of crazy years. So what are you most excited about in terms of ecosystem or sort of your business or anything else in the industry?
I'll go a little bit into philosophy and transformation just for a second. I believe that the world of business desperately needs partnership ecosystems to transform the culture of business. I believe the culture of business in 2023 is toxic and dysfunctional. It's a function of greed and scarcity. And if you think about what partner ecosystems are all about, they're all about abundance and love and the ability to turn what essentially is human relationships into a new way to do business. And I'm most excited about partnership leaders and partnership ecosystems transforming business by creating this new DNA of abundance. And, I use the word love mostly because that's what the world needs right now, right? And business can lead with love if it's properly invested with vision. And what we really need is we need to give our leaders, maybe they'll be us, a partner ecosystem, we'll become the CEOs. But in the meantime, we need to infuse into our businesses a new culture, a new DNA, and the partnership community is imbued with it already. So I'm most excited about the fact that I don't feel like I'm on this crusade of business transformation alone. I feel like all of us, you, me, everybody in the partner ecosystem gets the fact that partner ecosystems are a new way of doing business. And if we can take that new way of business and inculcate it into our overall business, we can transform business for good. And that's my devotion. That's what I'm most excited about.
World in general needs more love for sure. But at the same time, I think obviously this year is probably not going to be easy. The last year was difficult for tech. But I think the culture of building communities and sort of partnerships is very much sort of entrenched into tech already, and I think it's going to grow even more. So look, Allan, thanks so much for joining us today and then sharing your insights. Like people who will be watching this sort of as a recording, what is the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I just say Slack me on Partnership Leaders or DM me on LinkedIn. You can find me either place.